City Hall, which we're going to go and visit because it kind of links in with the story I want to share with you. And this is the theme of this week's call, which is how do you 10 times your result? So here's a little secret, given that we are now moving up the levels of the wealth spectrum and we're kind of like heading into the final parts of yellow to get up to green, which means that we're going to go into every step of how you build your business from one where you're making your 10,000s up to the 100,000s up to the millions. And here's a little secret, which is that the 9 levels of the wealth spectrum are not a sequential or incremental scale, they're a logarithmic scale. So the difference is a linear scale is one where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whereas a logarithmic scale is one which goes 10, 100, 1,000. Every step is a multiply by 10 by adding a 0 at the end. So the theme of this episode is the power of 0. You know, it's interesting, if you think for a moment about your perception of money, like what is a lot, what is a little to you? Chances are it's changed through your life. You know, I remember a time when $1 was a lot, when I was actually earning that through pocket money and I had to wait a whole week before I saw another dollar. I remember a time in my life when $10 was a lot or $100 was a lot, but every time that one felt like a lot, the one below wasn't so much. This is because these are linked to the different levels of the wealth spectrum. So when you're at infrared level, for example, you might be there thinking, you know what, $10 is not so much money, I could spend that on lunch, it's okay, but $100, where some of my friends who are out working, earning money, they'll go and blow that on a dinner, I can't see myself doing that. When they invite me out to eat, I have to decline or make an excuse or do something, because it just is too painful for me to just go and lose that $100. So what happens is at that first level, when we say it's not about the money, it's actually all about the money. And it's because it's so difficult for us to figure out how to make it. Now here's the key, when we get to red level, which is when we're now surviving, suddenly $100 is like, okay, it's like, hey, we know how to make some money. When the 100 comes in, we'll spend it. But suddenly when we need to do something where we've got to invest 1,000, it's like, I don't know how to do that. And so we get stuck. And if you're running a business at red level, there's no way you can go about building your business when you can't even risk $1,000 on a new promotion or a new resource you need. So then you get up to orange level, which is when you actually have earned the right to actually turn your own time into money by working with others. And suddenly 1,000 is okay. You know, a number of people who suddenly, when they've got a job and they're earning extra money, find the extra 1,000 that they can put into maybe a holiday they're gonna go on, where they wouldn't have even imagined going on the holiday before. You know, 100's easy for them to be able to make. But 10,000, no idea how to make the 10,000. That would be painful to lose, and it's certainly not something you're willing to risk because you don't know how much time it's gonna take to actually get yourself an extra 10,000. You don't know how to make it work. By the time you get to yellow level though, suddenly you know how to make 10,000 because you're willing to risk the 1,000. You know, you're putting the 1,000 into your promotion. You're saying, how do I actually work with this business to make it work for me by creating a new product or building a new promotion? You know, you'd invest 1,000 into, you know, the resources you need, like the website or the marketing. But then you've got a goal to hit the 10,000 or more. And 10,000 feels like a lot, and it's certainly not something you're willing to risk on its own, but it is something you're looking to make. So you're at the next band up. Think of each one being like the ceiling from the one below, like your first floor reaching for the second floor, and then when you get to the second floor, then suddenly that ceiling becomes your floor, right? So that's basically the base, and now you're stepping up the next level. And by the time you get to green level, well, you're investing the 10,000 in your team, doing things that the yellow level wouldn't dream of doing in terms of what you're investing in partnerships and resources, but that allows you to hit the 100,000. And similarly, when you're at blue level, 100,000 is something which is really your starting point, and you're actually out there doing $1 million promotions. You know, I know people who are at blue level, and they're actually there focused at how they go about, you know, like buying the right business in the right way, or getting the right team on board, finding the right manager, and then basically making the money from the capital, and they speak the language, which is the language which you need to be speaking to be able to get the financing in a way that yellow and green are not doing. So every one of these steps up to the next one, and really that's only 5 steps so far. Yeah, have a look at these columns over here, right? Let's imagine each of these is a step. And let's take something which we can all relate to, you know, because we can't all relate to $1 million, but we can relate to time. So let's take these steps, and let's take the one furthest away, right? And let's imagine that step over there is, I don't know, like the time since this, you know, by lunchtime today, which was like 8 hours ago. So just 8 and a bit hours. And that's the first one. So we can all conceive of that. I spend the day like going out, getting ready for our event coming up in Brisbane. I can account for every one of those hours. But let's take the next step, which is the second column. And let's make the second column 10 times that. So now we've kind of gone from like 8 hours to 80 hours. Just over 80 hours would be the equivalent of 3.5 days, all right? So that's the second one. And I can conceive of that as well, because that was the time since I was in Perth to get to here. But the third one along, just 3 along, we're now up to 36 days by adding another 0. 36 days is over a month. Now I've got to think, what was I doing a month and a bit ago? I might be able to remember that, but I add another 0, and I've now gone from 36 days up to 360. We're now at about a year, and we're on to the fourth one, just the fourth at 1 year. Now I'm going to think what I was doing a year ago. Another 0, 10 years. What was I doing 10 years ago? 2005. One more 0, 100 years. This building wasn't even here 100 years ago. It was built in 1930. 100 years ago it was 1915. In fact, Brisbane, there was almost nothing here. And even when this building was built, it was the tallest building around with this big tower here, and now it's surrounded by other tall buildings which are actually taller than it as well. So what's incredible is that these 5 steps, just by taking those 5, and we end up going from what is very, very conceivable to one which is inconceivable with 5 steps. If you had $10 and you took 5 zeros, you end up with $1 million. It's the same thing. It's just about saying, just what are those 5 steps I need to take? That's what we're doing by taking up every step of the spectrum level, is we're changing our thinking, because we've got different tools and a different language which is required to get up to the next step and to get up to the next step as well. You know, why did I bring you down here? I brought you down here because this this entire city hall was cobbled together by some architects that just got different inspiration from different places. So, for example, you've actually got down right here by the front here, you've actually got down here like lions, right, that are standing here. And these lions are actually based on the Trafalgar Square lines, which I've talked about in a past video. You can see there's through here the city hall itself. The city hall in there is actually based on the Pantheon in Rome. And this tower here, this tower which goes up here, is actually based on the St. Mark's Campanile, which is next to the St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, in Italy. Now that's an interesting story, because St. Mark, he was a saint that had spent his entire life in Alexandria. He built the Church of Alexandria. When he was there, they had the Lighthouse of Alexandria. If you go into the Basilica, all the stories there are about the Lighthouse of Alexandria. It shows up 6 times in the mosaics. And if you haven't seen the significance of the lighthouse as an inspiration for the wealth spectrum and the wealth lighthouse, you can go and watch this video right here, because I go through exactly why that inspiration came about and what it has to do with entrepreneurship. Here, this little model here, which showed up in many city halls at the time, is something which actually also is a symbol of both, on the one hand, time, because you've got the clock tower as part of it, and also of trade, because this was used as a symbol of trade in Venice for all the boats coming and going. And it actually was a lighthouse as well. So it was modeled on the whole concept of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, and the idea that there is a beacon to each of us on what's heading out to see what's coming back home as well. And so I share that because these symbols are all linked. If you were to take, at the time, an individual who, his name was Fibonacci, and he was based in Pisa, and he was around the same time, 1,000 years ago now we're talking, when the Campanile was and Venice was at its full extent. At that point, he was coming back from India, where he had come up with this symbol, which is called Zefiro. It was the number 0. It didn't even exist in the entire numbering system of the West until that time. And when he brought it back, he explained that it meant 2 things. One thing that it meant was the concept 0, which was a place marker, and the second thing was cipher, which was a code. So think about that. When you have something which is nothing, it's also everything. When you have something which can decipher, then you can speak a new language you couldn't speak before. It's like, you know, if you don't have the code to speaking Japanese, then all Japanese doesn't sound like anything. It's nothing. But the moment you actually have the code, then suddenly it's everything. And in the same way, every one of these different steps are a different code, a different language. So to master the language at orange level, and then at yellow level, and then at green level, allows you to actually move up to that next level, where suddenly what felt like a lot of money is not so much, and you're now willing to risk it, and you're willing to steer forward. And at the same time, what you're now aiming for is at a high number, which means that you're delivering value also at a 10 times of what you were delivering before. This is all about the next couple of steps coming our way. I'm going to finish here, and I really hope that what I've just shared helps you to see why sometimes it's so easy to get stuck, and why the way out of it isn't just to put your foot in the accelerator, but it's to change gears up to the next level, which is what the levels are all about. Here is a more contemporary statue here, which was done more recently. And as you can see here, we have a number of kangaroos. So I am now saying goodbye from Australia with the kangaroos. Check in next week when we have a very, very special announcement coming up. This is going to be when I talk about our mastermind and something I'm going to be sharing. And in the meantime, from me and Australia, have an absolutely awesome week, and we will catch up with you again in the next video.